After 3 days and a total of 3,896 laps of pre-season testing, we now know as much as we're going to about what shape each of the 10 teams is in heading into the Formula 1 season. And that means it's time to take on the most challenging of tasks, ranking them. We draw on a wide range of information to generate this ranking, including analysis both of short and long run pace, trackside observations, numerous paddock conversations with drivers and team personnel, and much more. As always, plenty of educated guesses also go into this, given the confounding factors of run plans, fuel loads, engine modes and track conditions. But that's the nature of the beast, given the patchy information to draw on from running at just one track, and that's all part of the fun. The result is a snapshot based on the evidence of the Bahrain test, rather than a prediction of what we expect for the season-opening Australian Grand Prix. It's also based on all-round performance, rather than being weighted towards qualifying or race pace. So here's our rundown of the best and worst of the 2025 F1 cars so far. 10. Sauber. It's looking a lot like 2024 for Sauber. Being the slowest based on headline lap times is one thing, but doing so in a car that's visibly the trickiest to drive means it can't simply be put down to run plan and fuel loads. Even by the standards of the current breed of F1 cars, the Sauber ran too stiff, suggesting a narrow setup window that didn't give the drivers the compliance they would like. Nico Hülkenberg admitted the baseline of the car is not amazing and that there are struggles. The Sauber C45 is described by technical director James Key as a mix of evolution and revolution, much of the latter under the skin, but that doesn't appear to have changed its form. If qualifying were to be held in Bahrain right now, you would expect the Saubers to be knocked out in Q1. There's a lot of work to be done. 9. Aston Martin. Aston Martin had a disrupted test, with only Red Bull completing fewer laps and illness restricting Lance Stroll to just 35 laps on the final day. That potentially played a part in the AMR 25 not looking at its best and appearing to struggle for pace. Team principal Andy Cowell believes progress has been made towards its objective of making the car more stable and benign, but admits there are plenty of areas that need improvements. The lap times were inconclusive but unspectacular. The car looked reasonably consistent from trackside, but there were signs of instability at corner entry, meaning the drivers often had to hesitate after the initial turn-in, a time and confidence sapping trait. And with Fernando Alonso admitting he expects the form to look similar to the end of last season, when Aston Martin had long since slid back from the front of the midfield, it's set for a tough start. 8. Haas. It was a case of why change a winning formula for Haas, which repeated last year's trick of being laser focused on running heavy and doing race stint preparation. That meant it was only the 9th quickest car on raw single lap pace, but it again looks set to be a competitive midfield proposition. As team principal Io Komatsu says, it's in the ballpark, he just doesn't know where. There was a problem with the bodywork, with Ollie Behrman losing a piece of his engine cover on the final day, and teammate Esteban Ocon had a similar problem at the car's Silverstone shakedown, but that's been put down to being too aggressive, with a straightforward fix presumably involving beefing up the fasteners. All signs are that the Haas is a good, solid midfield machine, albeit one that occasionally exhibited signs of low-speed understeer. That said, there's nothing to say it can quite hit the heights of last year, when it was often the 5th fastest car in the closing stages of the season, or at least, not yet. 7. Racing Bulls. Racing Bulls is in what might be called the midfield of the midfield, but maybe only a few tenths off the front of the group after a smooth test. The team had to chip away at an understeer problem over the course of the Bahrain test, and there were still signs of a slight front limitation on the final day, but nothing too serious. In the hands of Yuki Tsunoda in particular, the car looks like a decent package, with significant data accumulated and mileage logged. According to team principal Laurent Mekies, Racing Bulls is in the thick of the midfield fight and he expects there to be swings based on track configuration and updates. There was nothing special from Racing Bulls in Bahrain, but it looks like a dependable enough midfielder. 6. Alpine. What a difference a year makes for Alpine. After last year's disastrous Bahrain test, it's right in the thick of the fight at the front of the midfield this year, and both Pierre Gasly and Jack Doohan are happy with the way the car is behaving. We might even have been harsh on Alpine by ranking it only 6th, given it looks to be nip and tuck with Williams for the head of the midfield. Generally, the Alpine ran a little heavier on fuel load than the Williams in Bahrain, with the two cars looking to have similar pace. Alpine has built on its strong finish to 2024 and is capable of fighting for 5th in the championship with what looks to be a confidence-inducing car.
Did you know you can get 90% off a membership with us if you take out our pre-season special offer on Patreon? It's a great time to check out the Race Members Club, including bonus podcasts and videos, exclusive behind-the-scenes insights, the chance to ask questions for our shows, community groups where you can chat with us and like-minded fans, and you get all of our regular podcasts and YouTube videos ad-free. So if you want to become the ultimate insider for the start of F1 2025, head to Patreon via the link we've posted below to claim this limited time offer.
5. Williams. Williams set the fastest lap time of the test on the second day of running. While that led to some tipping it to join the lead group, that seems a step too far, as Carlos Sainz admitted. But that was never a realistic target. What Williams has done is made a big step from last year and emerged as a potential midfield leader, with Alpine at a very similar level. That Williams admitted to potentially running higher engine modes than its direct rival, and the fact it was often lighter than Alpine, muddies the waters when it comes to picking the midfield leader. But the drivers are happy, with Alex Albon hinting there's more pace that can easily be extracted. The car looks impressive on track throughout the test, albeit with occasional moments catching the drivers out, and on race runs the car seems quick and consistent. 4. Red Bull. The Red Bull RB21 is unquestionably fast enough to be in the leading group of 4, but it appears to have inherited at least some of its predecessors' problems. Max Verstappen made some positive noises early in the test, and his final verdict was that it wasn't bad, but there's a bit of work to do. Hardly a glowing review. His body language didn't inspire confidence, and he even had an uncharacteristic spin on the final afternoon. Watching from trackside, there were signs of the balance problems with the car not looking easy to get turned in and rotated through the corner consistently when pushing. Even when quick, the car looked tricky. Technical director Pierre Vacher also admitted the car wasn't responding how the team wanted it to at times. He said that while the car is going in the right direction, the magnitude of the step was not as big as expected. There was encouraging long-run pace on day 1, but Red Bull didn't do a full race simulation on the final day and devoted time to setup work. It even ran several Flovis paint experiments in the final 2 hours of the test in search of answers. Not a good sign. Red Bull clearly has some work to do between now and the Australian Grand Prix, with a car that looks like it is quick when in the sweet spot, but might prove difficult to keep there. However, if Red Bull can make a breakthrough, it's the car in the front group with the most potential for a leap forward. 3. Ferrari. Ferrari flirted with looking very good in this test and never seemed to be in terrible strife, but ended up tough to get a read on after a compromised final day. At its best, the car is nimble and strong, almost inseparable from the Mercedes in both poise on track and in lap time. But it occasionally exhibited some more prominent limitations, sometimes understeer, sometimes rear sliding, sometimes excessive tyre wear. Charles Leclerc felt that teams had more unknowns after testing than the last few years due to the changing conditions of the week, while Lewis Hamilton unsurprisingly lamented a final day cut short by an undisclosed technical problem. It seems the test is a little bit of a disappointment given how well sorted McLaren looked and the step Mercedes has apparently made. Ultimately, there are no major red flags for Ferrari, but it wasn't a head-turning week either, and that was noticeable from the slightly subdued vibe in the team. 2. Mercedes. The Mercedes looked unusually serene on track throughout the Bahrain test. It looked consistent, giving drivers George Russell and Kimi Antonelli real confidence. It also showed a good turn of pace, with the numbers placing it at a very similar level to Ferrari. Given the car looked so well balanced, despite a persistent front brake locking problem, that's given it the marginal edge in our ranking. Russell described the test as seamless, reflecting the positive mood in the team. The only real negatives are that McLaren is a clear step ahead and the lingering doubt about whether the unusually cold conditions in Bahrain flattered the W16, given the recent trend for Mercedes to struggle in warmer temperatures. We're not saying Mercedes is definitively second best and predicting it to stay there, but this was the most encouraging pre-season test for it since the ground effect car regulations were introduced in 2022. 1. McLaren. McLaren was only 5th fastest based on headline lap times, but make no mistake, its race pace was mighty and clear of everyone. That means its status as pre-season favourite has been confirmed. It was a successful test for McLaren, but not entirely perfect. Lando Norris, whose race pace was particularly impressive, highlighted a struggle with the rear end of the MCL 39. That was very visible trackside, particularly in the high-speed sweeps of turns 5 to 7, but it didn't appear to be problematic, with team principal Andrea Stella pointing out that a little rear instability is a useful trait for a track like Bahrain. The rising temperatures and increased wind on the final day exaggerated this trait. The consensus throughout the paddock is that McLaren is on top, although not by as big a margin as Red Bull were pre-season in 2023 and 24. So even if McLaren is as strong as it looked in testing, it's still likely to have a real fight on its hands once the racing starts.